Welcome to this morning's ceremony honoring and celebrating John Henry Felix, the theme of this event being a lifetime of giving and serving. We are glad that you have joined us today and very grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this salute to this wonderful man. Before we get started, I would like to introduce some of our distinguished guests. We are very honored to have with us Governor David Ige. Governor John Wahehe. Governor Neil Abercrombie. Mayor Rick Blangiardi and his wife Karen Chang. We are also privileged to have with us this morning General Bramlett, U.S. Army retired, former commander of U.S. Army Forces Command. Admiral Lapidar, U.S. Navy retired, former commander, U.S. Pacific Fleet. Admiral, I think you're here. Miss Diane Peters-Wynn, Chief Executive Officer, American Red Cross, Pacific Islands Region. Mr. Danny Kalikini, our Ambassador of Aloha. Mr. Scott Ruppel, National Eagle Scout Association Chairman and member of the Aloha Council Board. And Mr. Ronald Y.K. Lamb, my good friend and first Vice Commander, AMVETS Department of Hawaii. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can take your program out real quick and go to the back page. I'd like to draw your attention to the outside page. You'll notice a depiction with John Henry's picture on the top right-hand side. This is an image of a bronze plaque which will be the centerpiece of a monument soon to be located here at the Visitor Center. You may have noticed when you arrived some small American flags in the grass to your right there. This is where the monument will be located. The unveiling date for this monument has yet to be determined, but we anticipate sometime late spring 2022. I'd like to read this to you if you don't mind. I think it's very poignant and proper for Dr. Felix. We stand in the presence of the honored dead. We stand accountable to them and to the generations yet unborn, for whom they gave their lives. God, the Father of all living, watches over these hallowed graves and blesses the souls of those who rest here. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 32nd President of the United States. We salute our beloved veterans as they rest in peace. They have blessed our lives with their service to our country and given us the bountiful and priceless gift of freedom. May God keep us forever grateful as we remember their courage and sacrifices which echo into the eternity. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this bronze plaque will be in place sometime, hopefully by the end of spring 2022, right in that corner right there. Now it's time to open our ceremony with the national anthem, followed by Hawaii Pono'i and a Hawaiian blessing, all performed by our beloved kahu, Mr. Danny Kalikini. Sir?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Oh,
Part of my responsibilities this morning.
E ono ai aloha kako a pau, aloha ka kahi aka na ohana ki ia mai e ko mamai. Aloha. Ai, pola lihiki no ke ia. What a beautiful morning today. E puli kako, can we bow our heads in prayer? E ko mako I loko ka lani la ho'o mau no ko Kristo na te atu oho po mai tai a oe. No ko mea no ke apunia me ka mana me ka honau nea maloa kua. Aloha kia kua, God is love. 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 Ai. Ua mau ke ia o ka aina I ka pono. Ai. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please stand for the national anthem? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous flight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? God bless America. Ua mau ke ia o ka aina I ka pono. Hawaii pono I nana I ko moi, kalani ale I ke ale I. Makualani e kamehameha e na kaua e palei me kahihe. Makualani e kamehameha e na kaua e palei me kahihe. Imua.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Diane Peters-Wynn. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific Islands region of the American Red Cross, the former Vice President of Advancement at Chaminade University, the current President of Hui Hanai, and has served on the Kamehameha Schools Advisory Board, as well as numerous other boards. Ms. Wynn.
Governor Ige, Mayor and Mrs. Blangiardi, Governor Wahe'e, Governor Abercrombie, and distinguished guests. Aloha mai kākou. I am so honored to be able to be here today, and mahalo to our friends at AmVets Hawaii for organizing this, but to be here and be able to add my congratulations and share with you a little about this American and even international hero, Dr. John Henry Felix. Prior to my coming on board with the Red Cross, I worked with John Henry in various capacities and know well of his contributions in so many areas, from international diplomacy and military service to government and academia, and most notably, humanitarian causes. Our humanitarian mission at the Red Cross to alleviate human suffering in the face of disasters is embodied by John Henry. From Kalaupapa to Mozambique, he's crisscrossed the globe to serve those in need, whether they are suffering from famine in Africa or are amputees in Cambodia, learning to run their new prosthetics factory. His start in the Red Cross came early, in 1938, at Lincoln Elementary School. He joined the Junior Red Cross and assembled care kits for the children of China, victims of the Japanese invasion. He served on the National Red Cross Board, and here at home, he's been a guiding light on our board since 1956. He's currently our chair emeritus. As chapter chair, John Henry helped to secure the land and funding for our current headquarters at Diamond Head. Now, turning to his service abroad, and he likes to remind me that he paid for all of those trips when he was with the Red Cross out of his own pocket. Yeah. In his work abroad, John Henry developed Red Cross societies in Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, and Papua New Guinea. He participated in disaster operations throughout the Pacific and Southeast Asia. He participated in numerous refugee efforts in war zones in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, including Operation New Life in Guam, which involved some 150,000 refugees. In recognition of his global work in pursuit of the Red Cross mission, John Henry was the first and one of only 2 Americans to receive the distinguished Henri Dunant Award. And he recently founded the Henri Dunant Society here in Hawaii to commemorate his 80-plus years of service with the Red Cross. In his work, beyond just admiring Dunant's work in international humanitarian law, John Henry put the Geneva Conventions into practice by conducting prison inspections and overseeing prisoner exchanges. So you've heard of the 3 T's: time, treasure, and talent. In his recent publication on servant leadership, John Henry added a 4th T: themselves. Servant leaders give of themselves. In all of his refugee assignments, John Henry was especially concerned about the care of orphans. I see in my mind a black and white photo that we have framed, and it's a very poignant photo because in that photo, John Henry is feeding a young orphaned Vietnamese boy in a refugee camp. In April 1975, my husband's family were among those Vietnamese refugees transiting through Guam to begin their lives in the U.S. So, John Henry, your work with Vietnamese refugees has had a direct personal impact on our lives, too. Amanda Gorman, in her poem, The Hill We Climb, dared us not to let catastrophe prevail over us. She said, "There is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." John Henry, you have been and continue to be brave enough to be it. Aloha pumehana and congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, moving right along. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Scott Ruppel. Mr. Ruppel is a businessman with 25 years of construction experience and currently serves as the president of COA Project Management. His firm provides construction management services on Oahu, Maui, and the Big Island. Mr. Ruppel serves the youth of Hawaii as the National Eagle Scout Association chairman and member of the Aloha Council Board. He has been involved in scouting for 42 years. Scott, all yours.
Good afternoon. Well, sort of morning, I guess, still for some people. Aloha. On behalf of the Boy Scouts of America, the National Eagle Scout Association, and the Aloha Council, we are honored to help celebrate a remarkable gift from a remarkable man. Distinguished Eagle Scout John Henry Felix personifies the leadership and character development program of the Boy Scouts. John Henry, for 80 plus, give you a plus, years, continues to be an exceptional example of the 130 million young men and women that have participated in scouting. So important are his contributions to scouting in Hawaii that Dr. Felix was recently awarded the Leadership Legacy Award for exceptional service. The minimum requirement is 25 years. John has triple that. In my opinion, John Henry is certainly one of the most significant philanthropic and humanitarian leaders of Hawaii. His care and love for veterans, civil servants, and people of Hawaii runs deep. I'd like to share why his effort on behalf of veterans has meaning for me. My grandfather, Arthur Ruppel, served as an Army private in World War II. He was a bulldozer operator in the 12th 77th Engineering Combat Battalion. He spoke very little about his service. Now older, I understand why. This Purple Heart was awarded when his dozer blade exploded when he hit a German mine. He is one of the many of thousands killed or wounded in the service of his country. Passing in 2017 at 96, his character and work ethic are just like John Henry's. Today I wear my campaign hat to honor a man who's made it his life journey to care for veterans. Thousands of veteran sacrifices are honored from the tireless efforts of John Henry Felix. This extremely beautiful place and generous gift was made for the men and women who served, like my grandfather, for them to rest in peace. John Henry Felix, I say to you on this day, on behalf of Scouting, job well done. Thank you for all your efforts, and I'm sure we'll hear many more words honoring your service to both our country, Scouting, and humanity. Thanks, John.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor, distinct honor, to introduce the 7th Governor of the State of Hawaii, the Honorable Neil Abercrombie.
Aloha, everyone. I'm sure I speak for all the governors and probably the mayor, too, at this stage of his tenure in office when I say we thank you for the scattered applause we received when we were first announced. Considering the state of government these days and how it's being contemplated by the public, it is really not only a distinct privilege and honor, of course, for us to be here on John Henry's behalf today and to be with all of you, but it causes me to reflect a bit on what public service means. This cemetery, this sacred ground that we are privileged to be seated in today came about because of John Henry Felix. John, it's just going back, it's going to be almost half a century. And when I was first a rookie in the Hawaii State Legislature, when meeting with John, he said, I think that there's a gap that needs to be filled. Always looking to the future. That's what John was all about. Always looking to the future. And he said, we can do this. And what we see today, what we, in certain sense, take for granted. And I don't say that, take it for granted in the sense that we're indifferent or that we don't care. It's that in the rush of everyday life and the quotidian details that we all have to come to grips with every day, it has become, particularly with this veteran cemetery, kind of something in the atmosphere that we just hardly notice anymore. We know how important it is to every individual, but nonetheless, it's something that's just there. And the reason I bring that up is that, I really don't believe today is celebrating John Henry Felix, and John doesn't want that. And so I take it as a sincere observation by those who put the program together. But what we're really celebrating here is values. What we're really celebrating here today is what distinguishes us as creatures on this earth from the other creatures. Yes, the other creatures of our planet, there's some a capacity for a sense of family, some capacity to learn and to pass knowledge on to others, and gorilla families and dolphins and elephants and other treasured creatures of this planet. But only human beings have the capacity to obtain knowledge and pass that knowledge on, to be able to reflect and to be able to contemplate what makes their existence worthwhile. That's what this is about today. We're celebrating here today a ritual. You'll hear phrases about John Henry Felix today about public service and commitment and dedication. And I thought of those words when I was first contacted. And then I thought, enough about you, Neil. Let's think about John Henry Felix. Let's think about what his life means. See, that's a human side of things, isn't it, John? Right? He knows. He knew that was coming. But that's what differentiates us from the other creatures on this earth. Our capacity to learn and sustain knowledge and pass it on. What this memorial will mean to me, to you, to those who will come after us, is that this is what the fundamental values of our civilization is all about. That we understood what sacrifice was, that we understood what it was to be able to give of oneself for others. What not the words, but the values of compassion and kindness and thoughtfulness. All of those things that make up the essence of aloha. Danny Kalakini lives that every day of his life, and John Henry Felix lives every day of his life. Few of us can say that we live what we believe. I know I've got all my shortcomings and my failures, and which are pointed out to me regularly. Although I will say to you, David, in particular, John Wahehe and I already understand this. The longer you're out of office, the harder it is for people to remember why they didn't want you in office in the first place. That will not be the fate of this memorial. People will come here year after year, decade after decade, and they will realize those values that are embodied in the dedication of service of John Henry Felix's life is embodied in all those who will contemplate not just the plaque that's going to be here, but the reason it's here in the first place. And the reason is the life and dedication and service of John Henry Felix.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Mayor Rick Blangiardi, a longtime fan, admirer, and student of Mr. John Henry Felix.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Jason. Good morning and aloha, and welcome to all of our distinguished guests, of which there are many. First of all, I'm very deeply honored, truly deeply honored to be here with my wife, Karen, this morning, to just spend some time here to honor John. I think the bottom line for me, though, is this was an impossible task to spend 5 minutes, if you will, to try to describe my feelings and affections for this man, not the least of which was following the eloquence of Neil Abercrombie. But nonetheless, let me just say that, as Jason just said, I have long been a fan of John's. He's been my coach and my mentor. He's been my inspiration in so many different ways. And so I may be here in official capacity to present a proclamation as mayor, but I'm really here today to speak from my heart about my love and respect for this man, because he's truly made a difference, not just for me, but for so many of us who've lived here. He's truly, truly made a difference. So, John, you're a man of amazing strength and resiliency. And, by every definition that I know, you really are a Renaissance man. And you've helped so many, as I've said. So I'd like to, at least this morning, I want to be that voice in the presence of this wonderful place that we're in, but also to be that voice for the countless thousands of people who over the many years you've helped and they've benefited because of John Henry Felix. And that's not something you say casually. And in fact, in this day and age, for those of us who love the game of football, you know, a lot's been being talked about Tom Brady and all the records he's setting and how they'll never be matched again. And I will tell you, John Henry has his own list of accomplishments that I think will never be matched again either. First of all, he's been honored to be able to serve in the administration of 5 different mayors. 5 different mayors, which is pretty incredible. But of special and incredible note is that John served on every city and county board and commission, and he chaired all but one. I find that unbelievable that he could be the chair in every city, county, commission. I mean, just can't do that. I mean, that's off the charts. That's off the record. So whatever they're saying about Brady, they can say that in the context of football. But in the service of Hawaii and the contributions that that represents and what that's meant for all of us and so many people, that's off the charts. So I do want to mention, though, he was not the chair of heart, which he likes to say he was the chair of the conscience of heart, I guess, whatever that's supposed to mean. But John has literally and figuratively written the book on servant leadership. Diane alluded to that. He's been, as I said earlier, he's been not only a great coach and mentor to me, but he's been really a source of pure inspiration. In fact, in many ways, when Karen and I were discussing about whether or not I should run at the age of 73, John Henry Felix, in his life and his ongoing contributions, were nothing more than pure inspiration in making that decision. Because as I watch this man at 91 continue to be who he is, I just marvel at his incredible internal strength and, more than anything, his commitment to serve. So I just want to say, and I mean this very sincerely, I don't get to say this very often, John, I love you. I truly love you, and I respect you, and I can't say enough again on behalf of all of us here, but all of the people whose lives we represent, all of that in this moment. So with that, as mayor and city county, we're also going to do something I don't often do. I want to read the proclamation, because I think the proclamation actually captures a lot that I think deserves to be said. So with that, if you don't mind, I may go 1 minute over my 5 minutes here, but here we go. Whereas the distinguished career of John Henry Felix spans more than half a century in government, business, education, diplomacy, community service, philanthropy, and humanitarian service, and embodies the virtues of integrity, honesty, civil servant leadership, civic responsibility, and public service. And whereas a citizen of the world, his local, national, and international accomplishments, accolades, and awards are well-deserved and plentiful, and the people of Hawaii and Honolulu in particular continue to benefit from both the caliber and sheer quantity of his exceptional achievements. And whereas drafted into the U.S. Army in 1952, John Henry Felix is a decorated Korean War veteran who served in the 442nd Infantry Reserves, achieved the rank of colonel in the Hawaii Army Guard, and served in the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary Civil Air Patrol for 50 years, including 3 tours as wing commander, 10 years as a U.S. Air Force liaison officer, and he acquired land and secured funding for the Hawaii Wing's first permanent headquarters. And whereas he served in Vietnam as a non-combatant, caring for refugees and prisoners of war, and training troops to survive being taken captive during the Vietnam War, and he later served as chairman of the task force asked to help address the plight of homeless veterans in Hawaii. And whereas his military honors include 2 Distinguished Service Medals, the Hawaii Army Museum Society's 2019 EHE Award, 2 U.S. Air Force Civil Air Patrol Service Medal Awards, Veterans of Foreign Awards Patriots Award, and the Veterans Affairs Award for Distinguished Service. And whereas John Henry Felix spearheaded creation of the Hawaii State Veterans Cemetery, donating more than 35 acres of land, and working with then Governor John D. Waihee, Senator Daniel Inouye, and State Senator Neil Abercrombie to establish this picturesque memorial park in Kaneohe to honor those who serve. And whereas John Henry Felix has devoted his life to sustained and selfless voluntary service that consistently puts others first, enriching the lives of an untold number of people in Hawaii and around the world, and with his confident, engaging, and inclusive approach, making this world a better place. Now, therefore, I, Rick Blangiardi, Mayor of the City and County of Honolulu, do hereby proclaim December 18, 2021, sorry, Governor, taking a little bit of an exception, we're going to make today John Henry Felix Day to honor the life and legacy of John Henry Felix, his selfless service to our community, our country, and to humanity, and express gratitude for his noteworthy vision and generosity in establishing the Hawaii State Veterans Cemetery in Kaneohe. John, it is such a privilege to know a man as great as you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Governor of the State of Hawaii, the Honorable David Ige. Sir.
Good morning and aloha. I really am honored to be here today to pay tribute to John Henry Felix. I do know, as many have said before me, the accolades would go on and on and on. We would spend weeks and weeks and probably years if we really had to talk about all the things that John Henry Felix had done. I did want to note, Rick, that John Henry started serving the state of Hawaii as the chief of staff to the very first governor of the state of Hawaii, William Quinn, in 1959. Which means that, Rick, he has served every single governor that has ever served the state of Hawaii, and will continue to add his contributions in addition to everything else he does. I'm going to really cut my speech short because a lot of the things that have been said, but I really do want to add that we admire John Henry for his commitment to excellence, infinite capacity, and drive to make Hawaii a better place to live, especially for our veterans, who we honor by ensuring they receive dignity and respect even after they leave this earth. And as governor, I do have the privilege to honor our veterans right here on these grounds and truly appreciate John's gift. Today's event has been decades in the making and long overdue. The Hawaii State Veterans Cemetery opened 30 years ago with the generous donation from John Henry of 35 acres. And I really don't think, and I have to admit that I was around during that time. But, for us here in the state of Hawaii, our community answers the call to serve our country and our state more actively and more passionately than any other state in the country. We have more veterans per capita in the state of Hawaii than any other state in the country. And I know John will tell the story, but at that time we were concerned because Punch Bowl was nearing capacity. To think that we have so many in our community who answer the call to serve our country and our state in immeasurable ways, to be courageous in the face of all kinds of obstacles, and not have any space or any location to honor them, was really a concern that we all had. And so I do want to thank Governor Waihee for advocating and being part of this ceremony. And I especially want to thank John Henry Felix. In today's partisan political world, I have to say I've never met, or I've met very few people like John Henry, who is so giving, and there is never, ever an expectation of anything in return. It is really all about how he can continue to serve our community in the best way possible. So thank you so much, John.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ron Lamb, First Vice Commander, AMVETS Department of Hawaii, and a member of AMVETS since 1983. Commander Lamb was born and raised in Honolulu, graduated from Kamehameha High School and Brigham Young University. He served a religious mission in Hong Kong for 2.5 years during the Cultural Revolution riots of 1967. Upon graduating from BYU, he received his commission in the United States Army and was assigned duty in Germany. Ron has close friends and family who fought in Vietnam, and he sees his mission in AMVETS as providing comfort and assistance to our fellow veterans. My dear friend, Commander Ron Lamb.
Kakahiaka kako, aloha. I'm going to divert a little bit from the program. I noticed we can go to 12 noon. I am truly grateful to be among all of you here, and I want you to know this is not a trite remark. So I'm going to divert a little bit and tell you how this all came about. I think it was about February of this year, we first met with Governor Waihee, and John Henry asked us, AMVETS, if we would take the lead in a project. So we volunteered. We said yes, not knowing what we were getting into. At that time, the mandates were basically, I believe it was 10 people that could be gathered. And can you imagine a person like him and all of his friends, and for us to sit here and try to decide who are going to be the 10? So as time went on, you know, we still didn't know, even up until just a week ago, as to whether or not we could meet this way. So I say that, again, I'm honored to have all of you here to be present for this occasion. And I want to give a special shout out to those that made this possible beyond us. The committee was Jason Seal, myself, and Ms. Robin Rohr. But, you know, there's not much the three of us could have done without all of the others behind the scene. I won't take time to embarrass them, but you know what I'm saying anyway. And I'm so glad that during the holidays, we're able to have these honored guests here to speak to us, because they were the ones who were here that worked with John Henry in that capacity that made this cemetery possible. So this was a big undertaking for us, because we didn't know how we were going to fulfill this. I had lived away from Hawaii for 18 years. I was born and raised here. In 1987, I took an offer to return to Hawaii to manage a life insurance company as an executive vice president. And my assignment, one of my assignments, was to build a business relationship with Borthwick mortuaries. And that's how my friendship with John Henry first began in 1987. By the way, I have to have a correction. I joined AMVETS in 2013, not 1983. AMVETS is the only service organization chartered by Congress. This was done in 1945, initially for World War II veterans. President John F. Kennedy was a former AMVETS post commander. And in 1954, shortly after the Korean War, John Henry joined AMVETS. Now, I'm going to make some remarks that I wanted to make sure that you understood about the role that John Henry also played with AMVETS. Prior to my joining AMVETS, I had never heard of it. It was in 2013 when I first met Commander Donovan Lazarus, not knowing what I was getting into. Now, in 1960, John Henry was the chief of staff of the military aide to Governor Quinn, and he was on the design commission for the USS Arizona Memorial. Now, on your next visit there, look directly at the center of the marble shrine wall, about 3 feet above the floor. You'll see a tribute to the entombed sailors, and immediately below that, in small print, reads, quote, "This memorial wall was installed and rededicated by AMVETS," end of quote. Because of John Henry in 1960, that's why we have the marble shrine wall. AMVETS today is the designated keepers of the wall and committed to maintaining that. Now, the next time you visit the National Cemetery at Punch Bowl and you enjoy the carillon bells that chime and play on the hour, a little known fact also is that John Henry was also responsible for the placement of that memorial at Punch Bowl. And the monument that you see printed on the back of your program is sponsored and will be constructed and installed by AMVETS Hawaii. And it is our pledge and commitment to service and maintain it as we do all other monuments that we've installed. The carillon bells, the P3 monument at the Naval Air Station Barbers Point, where we hold our annual Battle of Midway commemorations on June 6th. And every December 5th, we commemorate Eva Battlefield, a former Marine air station where enemy planes first attacked on their way to Pearl Harbor. 1 year ago, we opened a Veterans Center in Eva, West Oahu, right near the Kapalina Beach homes. Since October of this year, we have fed 2,400 hot meals and beverages to youth and over 500 Thanksgiving meals to veterans and their families. Finally, one of our most exciting projects is the General Hank Stackpole Modulator Legacy, the biomodulator. It is based on an advanced technology for the alleviation of chronic pain. Ms. Robin Rohr worked with General Stackpole for 10 years on this non-pharmacological, non-toxic approach to chronic pain. And in partnership with John Henry Felix and Ms. Karen Mukai, CEO of Abilities Unlimited, this project was ignited at Tripler Army Medical Center and is now serving military patients in community clinics to help patients with chronic pain reclaim their health and well-being. Now, we were notified by AMVETS Nationals that in 2022, John Henry will be the recipient of the Silver Helmet Award. This is a picture of the award. This actual picture of this award was given to Daniel Akaka for his service. So a few years ago, this was presented to him. So this very same award that you see here will be presented to John Henry. Some of the people, there were many, many people who have received this award that we don't know the names to, but there were people who did outstanding things. They may not be well known, but they're ordinary people like you and me who have done outstanding things above and beyond. But some of the former recipients were Harry S. Truman, President Nixon, Senate Majority Leader at that time, Lyndon Johnson, President Dwight Eisenhower, George W. Bush, Colin Powell, Eleanor Roosevelt. We are deeply honored to have a person like John Henry in our midst to help us, our veterans organization, also in conjunction with the community and public service, that we can together put our resources to leverage all the resources that we have, that I believe we can solve any problem that comes our way if we're unified. And In conclusion, the mission of AMVETS is to tell the stories of the men and women who made personal sacrifices and to inspire succeeding generations to protect our nation and its legacy of freedoms. Mahalo, John Henry, and we salute you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce the former governor of the state of Hawaii, Governor John Wahehe, the first elected governor of native Hawaiian ancestry. He was governor when John Henry Felix donated the acreage for the Veterans Cemetery here in Kaneohe. And the cemetery was built during Governor Wahehe's tenure in office. Governor Wahehe, sir.
Aloha, distinguished guests and Governor Abercrombie. It's good. It's really good to be here this morning. And as I was sitting there, I couldn't help but think that in most places in America, this ceremony would never have happened. This ceremony would never have happened. You know, given the current state of affairs in our nation where there is so much political antagonism, it's wonderful that we here in Hawaii can celebrate something a little different, something a little special. You know, the reason why I bring this up is because I met John Henry for the first time running against each other for political office. You see, back in 1986, John Henry was the Republican candidate for the lieutenant governorship of Hawaii. He was paired with Senator Andy Anderson. And I was running as governor at that time. Now, the good news is for me was that Andy hated to campaign. And that was good news in more than one way because it also helped us win. But, you know, he hated to campaign. And so he would delegate the duties of going out to these public rallies and speaking on behalf of the Republican Party to John Henry Felix. So every night we would be at the same rallies or so forth, and I would sit there and I would listen to this gentleman get up and talk about the issues of Hawaii and what was important. Now, you need to remember that 1986 was still the post-Vietnam era. It was a time when we didn't go around talking necessarily about veterans. In fact, we didn't really appreciate the sacrifices that might have been made. And yet, this political candidate got up every night at every rally and talked about the need for us to pay attention to those that had served our country from Hawaii. And he did this. And I would sit there and listening, and I would think, you know, this is, yeah, it's extraordinary. This guy has something. And so I would go back, and I remember going back and talking to an old boss of mine, Alvin Shim, who was, you know, like the center of the Democratic Party, and asking him, who is this John Henry Felix? Because I didn't really know John at that time. And he said, he's an honest guy. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for John Henry, I won the election, right? So when I won the election, huh? So much for honesty. Yeah. Well, I remember right after I won the election, I realized I inherited a mansion, you know, and a chef. Can you imagine that? Coming from a two-bedroom condo in Kalihi, coming up, moving over there with a chef. And the first thing I wanted to do was meet with John Henry. I wanted to talk to him about the things that he spoke about regarding veterans. And so I invited him to breakfast one of the most maybe historic breakfasts that took place at Washington Place. And having a chef, the chef asked me, "What do you have?" I said, "Well, you mean I can choose anything for breakfast?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, steak and eggs, Why not?" And then he keeps reminding me of that what we ate that morning. And I keep telling him, not so much, this taxpayers' money. Don't tell everybody. But anyway, we had breakfast. And we had a long and intense conversation about how we could improve things for people who had served our country in the state of Hawaii. And John Henry had a program of four objectives. And the first thing he talked about was the need for us to recognize those who had served. And he told me about the fact that people returning from the Korean War had never been really, they didn't really have any parades going through Honolulu. And those that came back from Vietnam were not even taught about. And as I was thinking about doing this morning, I couldn't help but remember myself, all of the friends I knew who had served in Vietnam, my Attorney General Warren, my law school classmates, Alan, Butchie, Kumu, my young wife. We were married in 1970. I would find her crying in the middle of the night as we were sleeping because her brother was a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And yet I had never, ever told any of those individuals, "Thank you for your service." You see, and so this morning I wanted to do that. And the point of this conversation is that if you go to the state capitol today, you will see a monument dedicated to the veterans of the Korean War and Vietnam. Thank you, John Henry. But it wasn't enough to just recognize people. We also needed to make sure that we returned their service. And what was happening was people were coming back to Hawaii, and nobody was there helping them get the benefits that they were entitled to. And so we talked about what we could do about making that happen. Well, if you look into the agencies of the state of Hawaii, you will see that there is now an Office of Veterans Affairs. And that started at a breakfast. Thank you, John Henry. People got hurt in the war. They needed to be taken care of. And here we are in this great state of Hawaii with one of the best Army hospitals, Tripler, in the planet. And yet there was no veterans hospital. There was no veterans hospital, and many people had been working on that for years. And at that breakfast, John Henry told me what needed to be done to make that happen, how we needed to collaborate with our congressional delegation, with our local political leaders, and put together the force necessary to fund a veterans hospital here in the state of Hawaii. And he reached across the aisle not only to a new governor, but to the entire delegation, the congressional delegation of Hawaii. And together they worked and created the Spaki Matsunaga Veterans Hospital at Tripler. Thank you, John Henry. But most importantly for me was then the most touching for me was the fact that he reminded me that punch bowl was starting to be filled up, and that punch bowl no longer had space, so that the people who had served our nation from Hawaii would have a place to rest in their own home. He talked about the need for somebody to deal with that issue. And so we began the idea of putting together a system of veteran cemeteries across the state of Hawaii. And everywhere on the neighbor islands, the state had land. We could do that. We could have it done. But here on Oahu, getting land for anything, as any of you know, is a real challenge. Try and buy a house. No, that's not meant as anything political, Governor, you understand, right? Or Mayor. But try and buy a house on Oahu, much less buy land for a cemetery. And John Henry came to our administration as we were trying to deal with this problem and dedicated what you see today. He gave the veterans of Hawaii a resting place when they had none. Thank you, John Henry. To accomplish all of those things, to be part of those accomplishments meant that this extraordinary person had to reach across the aisle every time. He had to work with groups of people that don't necessarily find themselves on the same side. He had to create a collaboration of those that were interested in achieving an objective as opposed to just holding their polarized positions. It is my honor this morning to introduce all of you to an extraordinary person, the shoe shine boy from Kaka'ako. Can you imagine this? Signing shoes in Kaka'ako. Now you got to understand what that means. You see, Danny Kaleakini, living in Papakolea, was in the Heights. That's uptown. Kaka'ako is downtown. So here it is. Shoeshine boy from Kaka'ako goes out, becomes an Eagle Scout, serves his country in the Korean War, comes home, becomes a business CEO, successful CEO, becomes a statesman, not only serving in governor's administrations, but getting elected himself, becomes a philanthropist, and most importantly, becomes a collaborator to make it all, put it all together. It is my honor this morning to introduce you to my friend, all of us, a friend of all of us, really, John Henry Felix.
I'm overwhelmed. For a Portuguese boy to say that he's speechless is saying something. Governor Waihee, you ordered breakfast that morning, and it was comprised of steak and eggs, and he didn't know that I'm a vegetarian, so I forgive him for that. The theme of what I want to say, I don't have anything prepared because I discarded my 45-minute speech. Denny appreciates that. But it's all about collaboration. I've collaborated with most of you out there, with all the people behind me, with Andy Dahlberg, with our Homeless Veterans Task Force, with General Bramlett, with the Homeless Veterans Task Force and the Biodulative Program. I'm sorry Zap isn't here. I could say the same thing about him. But so many of you out there, we've worked together for so many years for the betterment of this community. I attribute my passion for volunteerism to my sainted mother. She introduced me to the great humanitarian Albert Schweitzer at a very tender age. And his words still ring loud and clear in my mind. There is no higher religion than human service. To work for the common good is the highest creed. I long remember that, and I followed her advice in being a public servant all of my life. I'm indeed grateful to all of you for your involvement in my life. You are my inspiration. I want to thank AMVETS for orchestrating this day. Donovan Lazarez, commander, an extraordinary leader, a deeply committed person, and his delegation who worked on this project, Ron Lamb, Colonel Steele, Robin Rohr. What an extraordinary team. They exemplify real leadership and attention to detail. I also want to thank my son for coming back from Thailand to take care of me. For those of you who don't know, I suffer from kidney failure, and I have to undergo 12 hours of treatment every week. So at times I'm a bit unsteady on my feet. I had 4 hours of treatment yesterday, so if I ramble a bit and look a little unsteady, I hope you understand. But I'm deeply appreciative of those who orchestrated this event today. And Donovan, your people, Colonel Seal, Ron Lamb, Robin, they deserve a special Medal of Honor. But remember one thing, it's all about working together for the common good. And let's always remember the words of Calvin Coolidge, President of the United States, who said, "A nation who doesn't remember its veterans will itself one day be unremembered." Thank you for this day. You've made my day, but I'm deeply humbled and deeply appreciative. Thank you very much.